So nighttime is this crazy type of psytrance where you have a whole bunch of different ideas all playing together. And today I just want to show you one of those ideas made completely from scratch. So what I want to do is I want to layer something in extra on this part over here. We have our groove elements over here, which is a little bit more of a groovy part that then transitions into this more like chaotic part. And really we just need more chaos in this second part. So that is what I'm going for. So the idea that I have is pretty simple inside of Serum. What I essentially want to do is I want to make one of those like trans-gated almost sine waves that move up and down the spectrum. But the way that I'm going to do that is not with an actual sine wave. I mean, I guess technically I am. There's just a sine wave over here actually. I can use that. But what we're going to do is we're going to play it very low. So we get this sub bass out of it. And then we're just going to turn on the filter and turn its resonance up to 100. And as you can hear, now we get the resonating out of that. And what we can do is we can use a chaos oscillator over here or one of these sample and holds and just turn the smoothing all the way up. This should allow it to move up and down, I guess, when I'm playing it. I was hoping that it would stay a little bit resonant a little bit longer. And because we're triggering multiple notes, it is going to re-trigger, which is not exactly what I want. So I guess we'll have to do this external from Serum. The way that we're then going to do that is just with a macro. And we're going to set up a little randomization over here. The way that I like to do my randomization when I'm using the LFOs in here is that I use 2 LFOs. So this guy is going to go to the mapping. We configure here macro 1. This guy is going to go to macro 1. And now as you can see, it's just going up and down, but we'll set this to random and then we'll turn the smoothing all the way up. And then this second guy over here is also going to go to random, but we're going to map it to the rate here. And by tactically setting these parameters here, we can get interesting shapes here. You can see sometimes it goes a little bit faster, sometimes it goes a little bit slower. And what we can also do is do that the other way around. So we can map this guy to this rate here. And that is where the real craziness starts, because now they start to interact with each other, right? Sometimes they both slow down, sometimes they both speed up again. Maybe you want this lower one to be a little bit higher. So that's overall this rate becomes a little bit higher and we get a little bit more of a rate of change of this guy. Also, this can be a little bit higher. I don't want this to be too slow here. But now you can see this macro is basically almost moving like it would with human movement. There's another way that you can do this, and that is just playing it in with MIDI movement itself. I do have a MIDI controller that is capable of doing that. But sometimes I just like the randomness to just completely take over. Anyway, back to our patch, what we need is we need those consistent notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an arpeggiator. Just set to 16 notes and a gate of 50% here. So now just playing this as one long note, we get something like this. And you can hear that we get this nice continuous movement between the notes, which is essentially what I'm going for. I do want to set this a little bit lower. And then the other thing that we of course have to do is we'll have to remove the lowest of frequencies here. What can also be cool is to give it a little bit more release. And then we'll give it a little bit of extra texture using something like a chorus. I guess one of the interesting things to do here is to use a little bit of randomization on this guy as well. And then in post, what I'm going to do is just adding an echo for a little bit of extra delay here. The final thing that I want to do is show you how I would mix this in. What I would probably do is something like this, where it comes in over a certain amount of time and then it lowers a little bit again. And then it goes back to like 0 dB over here. And then it just kind of rings out with the rest of them. That way it's not in the way of the transition point over here. And it takes a little bit of time for it to come in, meaning that the listener can get used to some of the other sequences that are playing before this guy takes over for a little bit. So overall, I think that's already a fairly cool element, but one of the other things that I want to show you is how you can emphasize the thing that we just did with kind of the sound coming in and moving out a little bit more using the delay. So what we can do is also make these kind of automations for the delay. So for example, towards the end here, we can have the delay come in a little bit more and I guess have it go down over here so that it becomes a little bit more clear towards this side. And then again, we'll go to all the way delayed over, say over here. And I like to have these guys be a little bit different than the volume automations in the points where they're acting. So as you can see, they're slightly in different spots and whatnot. That way it's not just the same morph happening on the volume versus what is happening on the delay itself. Now with the way that this is mixed in, I'm probably going to add 1 or 2 more sequences in here, but this is going to be pretty much a upfront sequence still. It's not like one of the guys that is, I believe this guy over here, which is a little bit more of this kind of backing sequence on these other 2 elements. So this is one of the main elements, the FM synth. And then we have the other guy over here, which comes in towards this part here. Those are really the main elements, and then we have this kind of backing element below it. And what I still need to do is add, as I said, a few more elements that just add to the chaos. What I think this element does need is a little bit of extra stereo widening, so that it sits more towards the sides as opposed to the mid. It is still not the main element, so it still has to sit behind some of the other elements, but it just needs to poke its head out every once in a while. As you can see, just making sure that the delay stops over here when that glitchy thing comes in. and that it doesn't become too overwhelming towards the end here. But what I think I want to do, because this is still a little bit of an upfront element, is to replace this randomization with a played-in MIDI. So what I'm going to do is I can just unmap this guy here. And then turning on my MIDI controller, I can map my MIDI controller. Make sure that there's no other modulations in here. But we can map this guy. And now we can play around with it. So we turn off any of the arming for the recording, make sure that this knob is on, and then we just hit record while it's playing. And as you can see, I went for some faster parts, some slower parts, which is going to give us a nice variation, and it's going to mimic what the modulation was doing over here. And then one thing that I want to do is just simplify the envelope so that we get something that is maybe a little bit easier to edit if we need to. But overall now we have a stable element, meaning that we can remove these guys. And then the final bit of processing that might be needed is a little bit of reverb on this, guys, just to put it in a room. And now we have something that sounds like this. So in my opinion, that is a very interesting idea for this kind of semi-supporting lead element. And if you think so too, make sure that you leave a like on the video, and while you're there, make sure that you subscribe as well. Another way to support the channel is to check out some of my products, which you can do over on Gumroad, Payhip and Andrea Crom's community store, which all three are linked down in the description. So thank you very much if you do that. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.